So that was really a really interesting set of issues from Joanna, and one of the things that struck me, and it struck me before, which she did touch on, was this idea that where there's an incentive, where there's something in it for people, they are quite happy to say they're disabled, for example. So I mentioned in the conversation with Joanne, the blue badge situation, where people, it seems to me, are quite happy to go and own up to, using that language, to being disabled. They'll fill in all the forms. They'll big up the fact that their walking's rubbish and they can't breathe and whatever else. And then they get the blue badge. I'm not having a go at them for that. I'm just simply saying that when it suits us, or when it suits some people, being disabled is all right. And I can think of other examples, like the cinema, for example, getting in on a free pass and stuff.
Absolutely, and you can take someone like your carer. How many
Yes.
girlfriends have been my carer for the evening? Don't always tell them that. They think I'm just being really generous. I agree, and I even remember being 16, 17, trying to get my head around some of this, and I thought, I'm disabled when I want to be,
Yeah.
because there were sort of access and tweaks. So why are they doing it now then?
Well, I mean, Joanna mentioned it, and we had Lawrence on, didn't we? And Lawrence mentioned it. This the kickoff point seems to be shopping. You know, getting home deliveries. That seems to be, so. That's the equivalent blue badge. So
Right.
if I can wave my disability at it, I might well jump the queue ahead of everybody. And actually, what's interesting, and I own this. I have quite liked jumping queues at times. You know, it's been quite nice. And when many years ago, when my kids were younger, and we went to Disney World, it was fantastic. We just kept getting on the ride, straight to the front of the queue again. And the bloke said, "Haven't you done this before?" Yep, we're doing it again. But I think they've tightened up since then.
Do you apologize? I mean, I've been pushed to the front of a queue somewhere, and as I'm going past, people go, "Oh, sorry, sorry." I
Yeah, I
mean, I
do.
don't
Yeah,
say I'm not going to. I still do
no,
it. I go, "Oh, I'm ever so sorry."
it happens. It must. I don't think this happens to you at airports because you're
It is airlines.
independent right up to the gate, aren't you? But I'm often escorted, and there's this massive queue going through the security bit. Wheelchair coming through. Mind your backs, all that. And I just cover myself. I put my head in my hands. I hate it, but
Act-
I don't like the fact that I have to wait half an hour.
You've reminded me though. I flew back last year from somewhere, and I get fairly close to the desk so they can see me, but I don't go right up. And then 20 minutes to go, all these speedy boarders get up and they start
Oh
queuing, don't
yes,
they?
yeah, they
And
do.
I tweeted, I photoed, there's about 12 people ahead of me. And I said, these Muppets don't realize any minute now I'm going to sail past all of them. And I did. And I went past and said, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, there's no point. But okay, so your bit is if there's something in it, I think the flip side of now is it because there's a fear? If they have an underlying condition that may be a disability as well, in that or impairment, they're nervous that they won't get the right support? Is there a bit of fear as well as a bit of a bonus?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because on the one hand, people seem to be, from what Joanna was saying, um, making more of their impairment or their disability to get the benefit, whatever that benefit might be. But when it comes to, for example, treatment because of, say, COVID, no, 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 I'm not going into hospital. There's a kind of almost a retrenching because they're very frightened that they'll catch something, that their condition will be made worse if they're in hospital and so on. I'm not framing that very well, but there is some kind of odd thing going on that on the one hand, I want to be disabled because there's that, but on the other hand, I don't want to be.
Uh, I haven't quite got that. The bit for me is it's about work,
Can't be
and
surprising, really.
well, no, because it's like it is confusing that bit. But I'm thinking people are saying they do have a health condition, therefore you need to treat me carefully because I have got something. I'm at
Yes.
risk greater than other people. There has been people who a company will say, "Has anybody got any underlying conditions?" Because in the early days we might send you home before others, and lots of people put their hands up, and there's someone we knew in the health profession. They are having to renegotiate because lots of doctors and specialists are now coming forward saying, actually, I've got asthma, I've got diabetes.
Yes.
No one ever knew about this, but now they're having to talk about it
Yeah.
because they're at risk.
Yeah.
something that it struck me. I think her phrase, which comes from her masters, this is Joanna saying, people don't want to declare or come out the closet because it's a threat to their autonomy and independence.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
think this is one of the strongest ones, and that's where someone doesn't understand what disability is. They see it in the old fashioned that the moment you say you've got this, you are now dependent on everybody else. You have no independence, and people almost ignore you. You're not part of the conversation. Why would anyone sign up to that?
Well, and if you think about some of the work we've done over the years, social model stuff, when you're told you have a condition, say, which is long term, it's going to last forever, and it will get worse or maybe disable you more and more. What are your references for how you're now supposed to be? Well, one is be pathetic and get everyone else to do stuff. The other is be heroic and deny totally you've got anything and you can cope. You know, it's that they're the two classical positions. And to be fair to human beings, what other role models are there? Well, there are the Olympic athletes, of course, the Paralympians. I could be one of them. Well, that is so. In some ways, at this moment, people are worried about their autonomy from either feeling they've got to act or they'll be seen as pathetic and not coping, or not heroic enough, i.e. they're not putting a brave enough face on things.
I made a little monologue. Someone wrote a monologue, and then I performed it in front of a camera. And this is something I've done during lockdown. I put it on my Facebook. I've not normally done that sort of thing. Two people who know me very well, they're friends and family friends or whatever, said, "You are so inspirational."
Oh God.
Now, I know the two I didn't answer because I'm like, what on earth? That's got nothing to do with anything. And I've just done a monologue. It's nonsense. But I suspect they're the same people who don't want to jump in the disability camp because they know how rubbish it is to be deemed inspirational. You
Yeah.
have to suddenly become exceptional when you're not.
Yeah.
I've
I
lost
mean,
you
I
as well.
liked one of our other guests very recently, Carrie Ann, who kind of talked about she wants to inspire people to do stuff like travel, but she doesn't like being called inspirational. And there is a subtle difference, isn't there? There's a subtle difference between susceptible and vulnerable. They're different things.
I think the people who call me inspirational on that monologue were the ones who would struggle with this anyway. There was a lovely line Joanna also said, you go shopping, you're older, and maybe you use a stick. But then when you go in the shop, I've done this, you go into the supermarket, you grab hold of the trolley because that gives you the balance and it's a walking frame. But plausible deniability says, no, I'm using a shopping frame, a shopping trolley just like everybody else.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful line, and I think everyone has done. Oh, that transition is part of it.
So why did I in my day drive a BMW 5 Series, and why did you drive a BMW something series, 6 Series? What was that about? In part, leaving aside all the usual stuff about
Our
cars.
penises.
No, it was about being like everybody else. When we were in the car driving, we were like everybody else. But in one bit of us, it was actually we're a bit better than everybody else because we're in a BMW and they're not, kind of thing. I think there is something about the invisibility. When you're driving, leave aside what car it is, when you are in a car driving, if you're normally in a wheelchair out, you're being seen in a very different way. You might be looked at in a BMW differently to being looked at in a wheelchair. So anything to disguise. So back to the stick in the trolley thing. I look like everybody else
At that point,
at
absolutely.
that point. Yeah.
Uh, you have got a nature that you bring me into your same things. I don't know. The car thing wasn't quite like that for me. The bit I remember about having the nice car, one, it was a beautiful thing. I
It
mean,
was. No,
that
it
was one
was.
thing.
Lovely.
I do remember when I'd get out of it, I liked people getting muddled by that. I enjoyed that. It wasn't about being in it. It was getting out of it, and they go, "Oh, okay. I didn't see that coming." And I'm like, "Yeah, you assumption making
You've
stereotype."
just reminded me. Do you remember Martin Lucas?
Yeah.
producer of programs for ITV when we knew him. He was, well, I can't remember which station he worked for, but he had a serious mobility impairment, and he
Yeah.
told me the same thing. He drove
Right.
a Porsche,
He did have a Porsche. Yeah.
and when he got out of it, it was such a performance. You know, legs were thrown in different directions,
Yeah.
sticks came out. And he said exactly the same thing you've just said. He loved watching people's reactions to this. He was a big guy too, wasn't he? He was 6 foot something or other.
It's
Big
also
man.
when, but I still do it now. So I walk past a disabled parking bay and there is a flash car in there, and I go, "Oh, there's no way they're disabled." So I'm actually stereotyping all the things that we don't like. The plausible deniability I thought was a very interesting thing, and I think older people must do that all the time. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
stereotyping them, but you adjust. You found your working way round, but that isn't disability in your head.
No. And Joanne referenced Maslow's pyramid and all that stuff, but she also touched on, for me, this longevity economy stuff, where designing products that, say, like the iPhone. Now, the iPhone, I have an iPhone and I know it's set for emergency. So if an Apple Watch, if I fall, it will send an alarm to somebody, etc. And it's brilliant. And the Apple Watch, as we know, is fantastic piece of design. It does all sorts of things. I will not wear a pendant. I'm not having a pendant. I'm sorry. I'm just not having one. I don't care. Now, I know lots of people listening to us do have pendants, but it is somehow about looking like other people, having this bit of kit, which does make me feel safer, no question. But it looks nice.
So I agree with you and I get it. Why wouldn't you wear a pendant when it's a perfectly sensible thing for you to potentially adopt?
I think partly for the same reason that lots of people don't wear hearing aids or glasses, because it makes me look, or at least I feel like I'm different wearing it. Secondly, I think a practical thing, they're a blooming nuisance. You keep forgetting it, or it's around your neck and you get caught around something when you're trying to do something else. Those are the kind of practical reasons, but it's mainly in my head. It's
Hmm.
not really about, of course they're fine. Of course they work. Of course they do what they're supposed to do. But there is something about the design and the way they look that doesn't make me feel I want to be seen wearing one, if you see what I mean.
I don't know if it's the design and the way look. I think it's what it is saying about you. It is loss
Mm,
of autonomy,
mm,
loss of independence. I now could fall over and not be able to get back up, which means I've got to press a button. I don't want to acknowledge that, but my Apple Watch builds it in amongst 1,000 other things, so
yeah,
I don't even have to go there.
yeah, yeah.
Sorted it. What about going back in the closet? So we all return to work or to our places or wherever we may be, and finally we've got the vaccine and we've got rid of COVID, or it's not such an issue. And then you're going back in and go, "Oh, so you were one of the people who had that health condition. What do we need to do?" And go, "No, whoa, 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 whoa. It's not an issue now." How do
No,
people
can
go
I have my
back
blue
in?
badge back now, please? Yes. Go back to the town hall and give you a blue badge.
Yeah. Get
Yeah,
in the queue for Sainsbury's like everybody else,
yeah.
buddy. Can you get back in?
It's really interesting, isn't it? What happens inside your head? I don't know, because I've always been like this. So I don't know what it's like to be able to not be like this, if you see what I mean.
I thought of this, and I think I hate it even saying this, but I think there's some truth where you have something, the resistance to say you have a disability is immense because of all the baggage. Eventually, you start using the kit and you acknowledge it, and then you go through the transition where you say, "Oh, it's about rights," or you don't have to be a campaigner, but you go, "I don't mind anymore." But not everybody gets all the way through to the end. Some people get stuck along the way. I I don't. If it was for the reason that they came forward, they may say it isn't relevant anymore. I do not wish to discuss.
Mm. Do you think, I mean, the people that are making use, say, of the supermarket deliveries on the basis that they've now got this underlying condition which they realise qualifies them, they are only basically, though, working on the model that they're ill, aren't they? They're using the illness impairment thing. They're not moving on to thinking about the barrier or any of the other social model stuff. That's not relevant. It's simply, I've got this thing, I'm entitled. That's it. End of story.
We should all get them T-shirts that say "Piss on Pity." And
Yes.
get them.
What? Nothing about us without
If
us.
you can jump the Sainsbury's queue, you must become a radical activist. Chain yourself to something. Uh, no, you're right. So, okay, but that's the point, isn't it? This was an illness that at this point of time, we said it at the end with Joanna. What if those people who were older, who had something that could be difficult because of, and also barriers, and those who have disabilities, inverted commas, if they became a united force?
Oh, goodness me. Well, yeah, when you were talking with her, you mentioned this, didn't you? I mean, as as a political person, I've often wondered why it is so difficult for the 11, 12 million disabled people to actually agree on something and do something about it. Do you know what I mean? Like vote a certain way, for example. Um, if you added in, because a lot of the 12 million, of course, are older people too, but if you added in the elderly population that have various underlying health issues or whatever, goodness me.
We'd
I mean,
run
it
the
would be
country.
scary, wouldn't it? It would be scary.
But we know the reason why you can't do a simple thing like vote, because we know that the percentage of disabled people that voted for Brexit was slightly higher. They were more pro Brexit than they were not Brexit, because they don't see it as a single issue. It's never a single issue. It's about 20 other things. And
Mm.
disability is the seventh most important thing to them. So it's, and I flinch now when we say 11, 12 million people, because I just think so many of them don't consider themselves as disabled. A load of them just say, well, I've got this one condition and that's what it is. And I'm not the same as Phil or Simon or whatever it
Mm.
might be. We're such a disparate group, aren't we? If it
Mm.
was one issue, removing barriers, making it easy, getting rid of stigma, we'd win. Mate,
Well, in
I've
our
had a thought.
lifetime, we've seen it happen. Probably the most it ever happened was over the Disability Discrimination Act, but then it was mainly led by the campaigning
Yeah.
voluntary organisations and charities rather than the majority of people. So the mass movement of people have never signed up together for something.
Have we stumbled across something? So you, Phil, friend, represent both groups here. You are in the disability camp. You are in the slightly older person camp. I
God.
think you must be our leader. You must unite us all.
First thing I have to do then is put a pendant on, do I? So that the rest of my age group can identify with me.
you you got to get over your hang-ups about being older. Yeah, that's for sure.
If I wear a pendant, I could well get hung up, couldn't I? Stuck round my lampshade.
But so I presume I love the fact that you said, "Oh, they get in the way and they get caught and everything." How many times have you worn one, by the way?
Never.
Yeah,
There
there
isn't
you
one
go.
in my house.
And you, oh, it gets
But
caught and
I,
everything. You've
but
never
I
even
know,
worn it.
I know people who do wear them.
Yeah, but they're not your friends anymore because of that.
I,
I
if Andy Warhol designed it, maybe I'd wear it or something. You know, made of Coca-Cola bottles.
I appreciate it is the wear it. Sorry, it is what it looks like, but it's what it brings with it, and that's Joanna's point about it's the loss of autonomy, independence. We know that if you say from day one I'm not disabled and day two I have a disability, nothing has changed with you. You've not gained or lost any autonomy or independence any more than if you started wearing it. You're not suddenly more or less. Nothing's changed. It's just what's in your head.
Yeah, of course. It's exactly the same. When I was younger, I could walk on crutches,
Yeah.
so I didn't use wheelchairs. I mean, looking back, what an idiot! I'd have done so much more if I'd been in a wheelchair much more often.
So we need older people to the older people who wear the pendants are the ones that need to come and talk to us to say, chill out, these are good. And
Yeah.
we need to speak to those who were hobbling along. Do you remember a few years ago, I was at, I think it was somewhere posh, like the Royal Opera House. And I was with Susan Scott Parker, and she'd gone off to get rid of her coat or something. I was on my scooter, and there
Right.
was this older man, maybe 70ish, walking with crutches, walking like a snail. It looked really painful, really uncomfortable. He was with his partner. And I looked at him in my head. I thought, well, you're an idiot. Why don't you just get yourself a scooter and sort your life out? And I tutted
Yeah.
internally. About 10 seconds later, he walked over slowly and said, "Excuse me, can I ask you, where did you get that scooter from? I think I need to get one of them." And I went, "Oh my God." Oh, and then over the years, we exchanged emails, and he got one, and he went traveling. He started going around the world. He said, "I haven't done this for years. My wife loves me now because I'm going out doing the shopping. I'm doing the." It was one of my most favourite moments. But
But hang on a minute. Are you suggesting
yeah.
that it was his encounter with you on that night that he decided he needed to get a scooter? Are you claiming that?
Well, okay, let me qualify that. There was a coincidence. I give you that.
Of enormous proportions.
What I suspect happened is he's been thinking about it for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
And two things happened. One, he saw my scooter and thought, that's not too bad, that's not too big. And then he probably saw, a very handsome, stylish man on it and thought, if I could be like him, if
Who was
only,
that?
I don't know, I'd given it to somebody else at that point. Adi Adepitan was sitting on it. Of course it was coincidence. But the point was, I thought it and then he came over. So, yeah, absolute.
I do think I'm trying to be serious now, but the fact you were there and he had an opportunity to talk to somebody who was using one, and it may well have been that because of your manner, your demeanor, the way you were conducting yourself.
Good suit. Nice suit.
Well, forget the suit. Well, you're at the Royal Opera House. You wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. You're in the Royal Opera House. This guy I can talk to. He's the same as me. He gets opera. He dresses smartly. Yeah, he's on a scooter, but we won't hold that against him. He might know something about him. Let's have a little chat with the guy. What he didn't know, I could have told him. He should have run me.
But that's the point. We hear it from someone else and we feel
You
okay
struggled
about it.
for a time, don't you recall? I can
No,
remember you with
I've
your
acknowledged it all the
get
way
out of
through.
here. I can remember you and your scooter
Absolutely.
avoidance.
It was across the Rubicon, the threshold when you do it. And I give this to Jen. I was with Jen at the time and she got tickets to go to Prague, I think. And it was the first time someone had invited me to go abroad and I didn't want to go because I knew I couldn't walk.
Yeah.
And she said, well, then you've got to get a scooter. And I'm like, "Ugh." And I got one and I loved it because it meant I could finally go around town. It was
And to be
hassle.
fair, a bit like my pendant, your scooter has to be a certain look. It has to be functional. It has to do certain things. I mean, you travel an awful lot, so it's got to fold up and break down and stuff like that. But it's got to look right. It's got to have a kind of cachet about it. Your scooter's not the same as a lot of scooters I see a lot of people on.
Yeah, we slightly do. However, I don't customize it. I don't think that, I do accept they're always going to be a little bit function over form sometimes, but people like Shannon Murray would fight that. She's saying make them beautiful and aesthetically
Yeah,
pleasing as
yeah,
well. But
yeah.
we moved around a little bit. I think Joanna's idea, when we said, is there evidence? She's saying, well, I don't know, but I just feel there's more people. What will be interesting is what will be the perception after. And also, we mentioned it in the talk with her. If the world has to stay in lockdown longer because of people with disabilities who are shielding themselves, will there be resentment? Will there be burden?
Yeah.
That could be awful.
Well, certainly there are conversations going on. We know they are about why from younger people, and by younger I don't mean 20-year-olds, I mean 40-year-olds. Why are we? It doesn't affect us, so why are we having to? I think those are beginning, and the longer this goes on, I think some of the material coming out of the US, where people are campaigning to open, the shops and everything else, and really quite violently. They're going in with guns and things. Oh, that's scary. I would feel vulnerable then.
And there's a bit of we care about these people, but only so far. Not if you're going to ruin my.
Yeah.
We need to stop and thank Joanna for raising it. I'm sorry we didn't drop it into a bigger show, but I'm glad we got a little chance to talk about it. If you just caught the video, then have a listen to the whole podcast because it's a good listen.
Yeah.